What's up, guys? Artem MMA Analysis here. Going to be talking about Dana White's Contender Series 2022, week number 8, and going to be open and honest, this is not the easiest card to pick fights for. I mean, there's a couple of close matchups here that could really go either way and really throw me off, but I've done a bit of study for this card. I should be okay, but I am a little bit nervous, especially for the first fight, Brandon Lewis versus Daniel Marcos. Daniel Marcos hasn't fought since 2019. But he's on the Contender Series. It's interesting. It's a weird one. Let's just look at week number 7 really quickly. So I went 4-1 on the card. Picked Teresa Blader to win. I thought she was going to get a finish, and she didn't. She kind of almost did in a way. Ismail Bonfim, I picked him to win, and he did beat Nariman Abasov. Was just the much more technical fighter, as I did say in my breakdown. So I'm pretty happy with that one. I think I did a pretty good job predicting that fight. Terrible job at predicting Carl Williams versus Jimmy Lawson, though. I really thought that Jimmy Lawson was going to run through Carl Williams, and I think that Jimmy Lawson thought that he was going to run through Carl Williams, but we learned that Jimmy Lawson has less than a round of cardio, man. Carl Williams looks really good. He got the contract as he should have. It wasn't the most exciting performance, but he took the fight on short notice. He deserves to get a contract, and I'll be very interested to see if he stays at heavyweight or moves back down to 205. I'm predicting he will probably go back down to 205. Gabriel Bonfim won by submission in the first round. Didn't go as I predicted. I thought the fight was going to stay on the feet. Bonfim was looking really good on the feet. So was Waters. They were both landing, but I thought that Bonfim was looking good on the feet. And then you got the submission. Then Vito Petrino versus Hidolfo Bellato. I said that if the fight went to the mat, it was going to be all over, and Hidolfo Bellato was going to lock up a sub. But Vito Petrino ended up reversing a takedown in the first round. He ended up on top and looking quite good in the grappling sequence. Then towards the end of the second round, he ended up with this crazy KO. Very, very similar to what Claudio Ribeiro did to Ivan Valenzuela, where Rodolfo Bellato was doing a spinning attack, and then Vito Petrino hits him with a nice left hook, puts him out, puts him down, and knocks him out for the second time. Then for Rodolfo Bellato, he's a great fighter, but he's been knocked out by Vito Petrino twice now in his career. And obviously Vito Petrino gets a contract. That was a pretty long intro. Just thought that I should recap week number 7. As you guys know, I love Dana White's Contender Series. I really do. As I said, this is a pretty difficult card for me to predict. And the first fight is the most difficult because Daniel Marcos hasn't fought since 2019. So let's just get into that fight. Let's just get into the card. And in this one here, you've got Brandon Lewis taking on Daniel Marcos, and it's such a weird fight. Daniel Marcos hasn't fought for about 2.5 years, and he's on the Contender Series, and even then, like, he was fighting a guy that was 10-5. He does have wins over guys with really, really good records, but when I was watching them, they didn't really look as good as the record suggested. Like, Daniel Marcos was fighting Gaston Manzo, who was listed at 5'5" on Tapology, but Daniel Marcos looked so much bigger than his opponent in that fight, and then he's fighting guys that are 5-4, and then 8-2, which is good, 7-1, which is good, and then 5-3. This is like 5 years ago we're talking about. Daniel Marcos hasn't been super active, and then even then, he hasn't fought for almost like 2.5 years now, and now he's on the Contender Series against Brandon Lewis, who is returning from his previous unsuccessful Contender Series bout against Mo Miller, and he did kind of bounce back there, and he fought Taylor Moore, which is locked behind like a paywall to watch that fight, which was painful, but we got there. I found it eventually, but once again, Brandon Lewis hasn't been that active either. He took a decent hiatus between his 2 LFA fights. I'm not too sure why. Maybe he was studying or kind of doing something, focusing on a career elsewhere potentially, and then he come back, looked alright. He beat a guy by split decision. Then he took on Mo Miller, a super prospect at the time. In hindsight, maybe Mo Miller wasn't as good as we all thought he was. And what does give me a little bit of reservations in this fight is, in that fight, Mo Miller, the wrestler, was hitting Brandon Lewis with some big shots, and he was landing them quite easily, which is kind of interesting when you come to this prediction, because Daniel Marcos is a kickboxer. That is really what he brings to the game. He throws a lot of front kicks. He does have pretty good boxing as well, and does throw combinations if it allows it. He does have a good clinch game himself, but his takedown defense is also good, but it's definitely worth noting the guys that have tried to take him down are not to the level of Brandon Lewis. Brandon Lewis, I would say, he shows a lot of striking in his fights. He definitely, when he was fighting Mo Miller, wanted the fight to be on the feet, but he did get taken down 4 times in that matchup, which is somewhat of a concern, but Daniel Marcos ain't gonna try and take him down. So, Lewis, once again, the smaller man in the matchup. I believe Mo Miller was 5'8" in that Dana White's Contender Series fight, and Daniel Marcos, in all of his fights, really, he's been the bigger man, so it's not going to be anything new to him. But I can sit here and give you a breakdown on what Daniel Marcos has looked like in the past, and Daniel Marcos could walk into that octagon a completely different fighter because he's taken 2.5 years off. He's 29 years old, so he will be. Sorry, I was turning my heater off. He will still be making improvements in his career, and he could just completely look different. He could come out there and wrestle and grapple Brandon Lewis and just shock everyone. But yeah, as I said, he hasn't fought in 2.5 years. It's so hard to make a prediction. I have been wanting to pick Daniel Marcos on in this fight here. It's definitely worth noting though. If you want to find footage on this guy, search Daniel Soncora instead. You'll find a lot more. But I'm gonna side with Brandon Lewis. It's a risky one because he is quite hittable on the feet. At least he was in the Mo Miller fight. But he's got underrated wrestling and grappling, and if he really, really wants to win this fight, I think that's what he's got to look to do, because Daniel Marcos is showing great takedown defense, but not against the greatest level of competition at all. I mean, in fact, I'd say that Brandon Lewis almost tends to be like just seems like the better fighter, the much better fighter. If you watch the tape, and you look at Daniel Marcos 12-0 against good competition, you would expect to be super impressed. But I just wasn't really. It was such a weird situation. It's a very winnable fight for both guys. It could go either way. It really could. I mean, Marcos hasn't fought since 2019, so I don't really know how he's gonna look. He's got a great record, he really does, but it's just so tough to pick him when he hasn't fought since 2019, and even then in the tape study, I haven't been overly impressed, whereas Brandon Lewis is 25 years old. He's making constant improvements. He unfortunately did miss weight, it seems like, in his last fight, unless there was a catch weight and I completely missed it. But I shouldn't be sorting this out on video, but we're 4 minutes into the prediction already. Oh dear. But yeah, it's just a weird one. Yeah, it looks like he might have missed weight in that fight. But yeah, anyways, pick is Brandon Lewis. Not that confident. Not many people going with Lewis. Probably because they look at his record and are making their prediction. But I'm gonna have to go with Brandon Lewis. In hindsight, the loss to Mo Miller isn't that great. And even if he does win and get a contract, it's going to be a pretty tough road ahead, because I think that both guys haven't proven to me that they're going to be able to do great things in the UFC. And I know that's a very harsh thing for me to say, just a guy that is sitting behind a camera. But this is such a hard fight to predict. And both guys haven't looked absolutely incredible on tape. So I'm going to go with Brandon Lewis. I think he's a little bit better. Daniel Marcos, I was watching his fights, and I just wasn't impressed. He was beating up guys that were so much smaller than him, in arenas that were selling like hundreds of tickets too. Like, not really arenas, they just look like gyms, but heaps of people were showing up to these fights, but that's not the point. Let's just move on into the next fight. And now you move on to the second fight of the night. You got Bruno Brazil taking on Malik Man, and in my opinion, I'd be quite surprised if the winner of this fight did get a contract. Just the way that other fights have been going in the past. They didn't give Teresa Blader a contract. If they're not giving Teresa Blader a contract, I'd be very surprised if they give either of these two girls a contract, open and honest. Both girls are 29 years old. Malik Mans isn't listed there, but she is 29 years old. And I might have her reach. I don't have her reach listed. So the point is, though, she's 5 foot, and she's a lot smaller than Bruno Brazil. And this is not at 115 pounds like these two girls have fought at the past. It's at 125 pounds, which is going to favour the much stronger, well, the much bigger fighter in Bruno Brazil. You could maybe argue that Malik Man is stronger. She is the wrestler, she is the grappler out of the two. But Bruno Brazil's 5'6". She's going to be a lot taller than Malik Man, who is quite short and stocky for the division. I think that Bruno Brazil is the much better striker out of the two. Malik Man probably is the better wrestler and grappler. Brazil can get taken down, but she does have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu herself. But Malik Man, I'll just say, is just probably the better grappler out of the two. Just to point it out. But I don't know, it's almost like a Hayley Cowan situation, where Hayley Cowan very recently lost to a girl with a very bad record, 1-2, and then come on to Dana White's Contender Series and won her a fight. But Malik Man coming for a split decision win over a girl that was 1-1. Coming into this fight ain't the greatest look. She did submit a 4-1 girl, and before that wasn't fighting the best competition. Bruno Brazil recently defeated the undefeated Yasmin Castanho, and before that she wasn't fighting the greatest girls in the world, but she was fighting okay competition for the experience that she does have. And I think this is a big step up in competition for both girls. But for Malik Man, this is a huge step up in competition in my opinion from who she's been fighting in the past. I think Bruno Brazil's going to be a lot bigger and a lot stronger. I'm terrible at predicting women's MMA, I really am, but I think that Bruno Brazil's going to pick apart Malik Man on the feet from range, and I think Malik Man's going to be constantly looking for the clinch, constantly looking for takedowns, and Brazil hopefully is able to shrug it off and keep Man off her. But obviously in a lot of women's MMA fights, you kind of want to pick the grappler, because you see a lot of clinch positions, you see a lot of takedowns, you see a lot of grappling in general, because a lot of girls just tend to not have the KO power as a lot of the male fighters do. And that's all good, but especially at 115 and 125. But I think that Bruno Brazil, I don't think she's going to knock out Malik Man. I think she's going to win a decision on the feet. I think she's going to kickbox with Man, outpoint her from range, and win a decision that way. Massive step up in competition for Malik Man. Too big, in my opinion. Bruno Brazil just beat a 5-0 girl in her last fight. I think she's going to beat another one in Malik Man. So I'm going to be picking her by decision. I don't think the winner gets a contract, though. If you're not signing Teresa Blader, you're not signing Bruno Brazil or Malik Man. I'm actually kind of pressed they didn't sign Teresa Blader, because she's got a win over Lucy Pudilova when Lucy Pudilova was making a run back into the UFC after getting cut initially. So Teresa Blader proved to her that she's a UFC level fighter before Contender Series. But it is what it is, man. It's just mind blowing, mind blowing. I'm gonna go Bruno Brazil decision. And in the next fight, you got Malik Lewis taking on Trevor Peek. Two guys that are very hyped up, but I would say the hype is definitely on the Trevor Peek side. This guy is coming off a first-round KO win over Worthy, which is a pretty good win, especially if you are 5-0 in your career. And debuting at 155. Trevor Peek, man, his whole career has been taking place at 170 for the most part. He fought Chris Mims at 170. He fought Ben Brewer at 180 pounds. He fought David Robbins at 170, Warren Smith at 170, and then Worthy at 155. And now he's taking on Malik Lewis at 155. So Trevor Peek, not a stranger at fighting guys that are taller than him. He does stand at 5'9", which isn't the tallest for 155, considering the fact that his opponent, Malik Lewis, is 6 foot. But if you look at the Worthy win, I do rate this win a little bit higher than a lot of people will, because he was on a 2-fight win streak, not over the greatest competition, but a 2-fight win streak since losing and getting cut from the UFC. But you kind of got to look at it like this, man. Who hasn't knocked out Worthy? Worthy's got 10 losses in his career, 9 of them by KO, man. This guy, hopefully he doesn't have like constant headaches, if you know what I mean. But it's a good win. But it's not like, oh my god, like that's like a life-changing win. Like Worthy, yeah, he just got knocked out so many times in his career. Trevor Peek doing it is impressive. It really is, because Worthy did have a run in the UFC. But it's not like, oh my god, like that's such a crazy, like, good win. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to downplay that. That's a great win. Malik Lewis, though, is also coming off a great win over a guy that was 15-3. But if you do look at this guy, Marcos Vinicius' record, he lost since then against the guy that isn't the same level of Malik Lewis, in my opinion. And his record's a little bit padded. So it's a pretty padded 15-3 record, but it was a good win for Malik Lewis, and it definitely is a good win coming into this fight, because Trevor Peek, man, this guy's got some of the craziest KO power I've seen, man. Like, this guy just lands on you and backs people up. He landed 1 or 2 punches on David Robbins, and David Robbins did not want to be in there anymore. Like, David Robbins had enough of it. He wasn't having a bar of it after he landed 1 more, and it's quite funny. That fight was actually taking place in a bar. And then he knocked out Warren Smith pretty early into the fight, knocked out Worthy in his debut at 155. He's got 1 no contest on his record, and I don't know why that was. I tried looking into it. I genuinely don't know why it was a no contest, but he did have an amateur record as well, went 5-2. Malik Lewis also had an amateur record where he went 7-0 undefeated, and he wasn't beating the worst guys in the world. He took on a guy that's 10-9 in amateur, not the greatest record, but he was 2-0 at the time. Good experience. And then after that, he kind of moved up, was 6-0, took on a guy 6-1 amateur. Good for him, and now he's built up his record. Not against the greatest guys in the world, but he was 2-0 when he fought a guy that was 1-8, you know, like, you can excuse that. And then he took on a guy that was 4-2 when he's 3-0, and then he's just jumped in there against a guy that was 15-3 when he was 4-0, which is cool. And I like that win over Marcos Vinicius, because what it showed me is that Malik Lewis is willing to wrestle and willing to grapple if he needs to. And that's how he wins the fight, in my opinion. I am picking Malik Lewis. No one's picking Malik Lewis. 15% on Tapology are picking Malik Lewis. Trevor Peek is definitely going to be like one of the more hyped up guys coming into the Contender Series this week. It isn't the most stacked card in the world, but I feel like Trevor Peek's name definitely holds some sort of value, considering he did just knock out Worthy, as I said. But on my notes here, yeah, as I said, Trevor Peek's got crazy heavy hands, and he does throw a lot of leg kicks as well. He threw a couple of leg kicks over David Robbins before he set up the KO, and that fight only lasted 30 seconds, but he did throw good leg kicks. But his cardio maybe could be interesting because all of his first wins are in the first round. I don't know how he's going to look in the second and third, but I do trust that he looks very in shape. He looks very good, looks very professional. So I do trust that he's going to look fine. But Malik Lewis is a guy that's going to wrestle, man, and I like that. I really like that out of Malik Lewis in this matchup, man. If he wants to win the fight against Trevor Peck, he really does have to wrestle, and that's what he's going to do. That's what I'm trusting him to do anyway. I think Malik Lewis, very early on into the fight, he's going to shoot for a takedown. And the thing with Malik Lewis is, when he shoots for a takedown, he doesn't give up for it. He spent the entire first round against Marcos Vinicius trying to get a takedown over on him. It was clinched up against the cage. It was pretty boring, but he was working enough to where the ref couldn't separate it because he was throwing knees. He was doing this and that. At times, Vinicius was reversing him, and he ended up kind of getting back into his dominant position, looking for a takedown. And he kind of did it the same in the second round. He ended up on bottom at one point, and then he got the submission from bottom. But he did show to me that he's willing to wrestle if he needs to, and I thought I like that. I really like that in the matchup. I like the size as well. He's 6 foot. Trevor Peck is 5'9", but it hasn't slowed down Trevor Peck at all in the past. As I said, he fought at 180 pounds at one point, which is awesome. But I do think that we're gonna see Malik Lewis win this fight. I think Trevor Peck is definitely the better striker, in my opinion. I think that on the feet, I'm gonna be sweating watching this fight because I think Peck's got a very good chance at knocking him out. But I think if Malik Lewis wants to win this fight, he's going to have to grapple Peck, and I think that's what he's going to do, or at least I'm trusting him to do that. So I'm going to be going with Malik Lewis here, and because it's Dana White's Contender Series, I'm gonna pick a submission. I think he's going to get a finish at some point in the fight. So give me Malik Lewis to win this fight, man. It's tough. It is tough, but I like Lewis. I like his skill set. I like his size. I like his wrestling. I like the fight IQ as well. Like, you know, he's gonna. I think I can trust him to wrestle here, so I'm going to be picking him to win by his wrestling. That was a long breakdown for one fight. I apologize, but this is one I was so stuck on because I looked at it and I was like, man, Trevor Peck has got to win this fight, man. And then I started watching the tape, and my mind kind of changed. It's a tough one. It's probably the only tough one left we've got on the card. There's 2 real tough ones for me, and after that we should be smooth sailing. So let's move on to the next fight. And in this next one, you got Ikram Aliskerov taking on Mario Souza. And you may recognize Ikram Aliskerov's name if you really have been following the sport somewhat closely, because you may notice the headliner of UFC 279, Khamzat Chimaev, has fought Ikram Aliskerov in the past. He did beat Ikram Aliskerov, but before Khamzat Chimaev kind of got into the UFC, Ikram Aliskerov was the guy that gave Khamzat Chimaev the most problems. And when Khamzat Chimaev was making this crazy run up the division, I was kind of thinking, you know, maybe we see Ikram Aliskerov in the UFC. I mean, you know, like he posed some sort of threat to Khamzat Chimaev, and he made something happen. So he beat Nashon Burrell, former UFC fighter in Eagle FC, and before that he was beating a couple of good guys, and now Dennis Tiulin, actually, who was in the UFC now, and now he is into Dana White's Contender Series, getting a shot. But he's fighting Mario Souza at 185 pounds as well. I like Mario Souza. I don't like Mario Souza in this matchup. I am picking Ikram Aliskerov to win. But Mario Souza, he's had such a tough run of it, man. I feel like this guy, he's been done a little bit dirty, you know what I mean? Like, he lost earlier on in his career when he was 7-0, and then he built it up, defeated an undefeated guy in Marius, and then didn't get the contract, come back, fought Chidi Njokwani, lasted 3 rounds with him, and now he's come back. He's beaten one guy to pad his record, I guess, and then another guy that was 14-3, and now he's in there with Ikram Aliskerov, and it's just not a winnable matchup for me. I genuinely do believe that Mario Souza is UFC level. I do. But this is such a bad matchup for him. Mario Souza is a good kickboxer. He's got good power on the hands. He's got good power on the. He just got good power on the feet in general. But where he struggles in the fight is his takedown defense, and what's Ikram Aliskerov gonna look to do? He's a great wrestler. He really is. He's a great grappler, and he's a chain wrestler. If he's got you stuck against the cage, he's not gonna let you go. He's gonna keep looking for takedowns. If you get back up, he's gonna take you down again. If you get back up, he's gonna take you down again. Ikram Aliskerov, I think he's gonna work Mario Souza for a few rounds and eventually find the finish. Probably by ground and pound like Chidi Njokwani did. I feel bad for Souza, man, because I like Souza. I really do. I like his attitude. 3rd time fighting on Dana White's Contender Series. Nightmare matchup, though. He's got bad takedown defense. Aliskerov has got amazing wrestling, amazing takedowns. It's a sad it's a sad matchup for poor Mario Souza. But good for Alaskarov. I do expect him to be signed to the UFC. Maybe he comes up Chimaev, says something about him. When he gets in, my mouse just stopped working, which is frustrating because I like using my mouse. There we go. And yeah, I'll call it there on the prediction. That's kind of it. It's just that Mario Souza, I think, is the more powerful striker. Ikram Alaskarov striking is pretty good. It's just so much more improved to when he fought comes up the first time. But I think Mario Souza's got power to maybe knock out Alaskarov, but Alaskarov, he's just going to be looking for takedowns, you know, and Souza's takedown defense is a question. And it's just a nightmare matchup, so I'm going to have to go with Alaskarov. And now, in like the main event, or the featured fight of the night, you've got Alan Bagoso taking on Farid Basharat. And Farid Basharat was meant to fight on the first week of the Contender Series, but his opponent William Souza pulled out, and they never found him a replacement, so he weighed in. I believe he weighed in at 135 successfully, and I believe he got his show money for that, but unfortunately, UFC didn't sign him. They're like, look, mate, you got to fight on the Contender Series for us. So that's what they're doing. They found him a short notice replacement, and Alan Bagoso, who in my opinion is a tougher matchup for Farid Basharat than the original one. But I'm going to still pick Farid Basharat here. I think if he uses his mixed martial arts to win the fight, he should win. You know, he's got a very good, well-rounded skill set, and I feel like if he can mix it all up, that's his path to victory to defeating Alan Bagoso. Because Alan Bagoso's got finishing power on the feet, he's got finishing ability on the ground, he's got good defensive submissions. He does have a couple of guillotine choke wins, and he does threaten with the guillotine choke if someone does look to take him down. But I think that Farid Basharat, he's a good enough, he's a watchful enough grappler to avoid getting submitted with a guillotine, in my opinion, by Alan Bagoso. So I think that I can trust Farid Basharat to win this one here. On the feet, he's a good kickboxer. He's going to be a lot bigger than Bagoso, 3 inches taller. I believe he's got a longer reach as well. And he does mix it up pretty well. Bagoso is a bit of a powerhouse of a man at 5'5". He does kind of pack it all into that smaller frame. But he makes it work, man. He is definitely a very strong, very powerful fighter. But I think if Farid Basharat can just use his skill set, because I do think he's the more skilled fighter out of the two, we can see Farid win. I think that we're going to see Farid Basharat look to take the fight to the ground and win it like that. I'm going Farid Basharat by decision in this one here. I mean, he's definitely maybe live for a finish. It's a tough fight to predict because Farid, he hasn't fought anyone that has really tested his ability. Like, he did take a guy on that was 16-8 in Octagon, which is cool. But before that, you know, it just hasn't been the greatest level of competition. But I think that Basharat should get the job done. I'm leaning decision. So many people picking submission. I think it's because Basharat has never won a decision in his career. I believe all of his wins are inside the distance. But I think that we might see a decision win in this one here. He's got 2 decision wins actually, 5 by submission. But I'm going with decision. I think that Alan Bagoso should be able to defend submission attempts, this and that, and stay live enough for a decision win. I like it. I like him, so I'm going to be picking Basharat to win. Okay, now I'm thinking about it. Maybe he is live for a sub. Bagoso's tough though. I'm still gonna side with decision. I wouldn't bet a prop. In fact, this whole card is so tough to bet. Let's just get into the outro. I mean, I'm sorry guys. Open and honest, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it. But I'm so tired, man. I've got a big weekend coming up, and I'm planning for that and this. First week of my new job. Hyped as for that, but I've kind of rushed all of my research for this one here, but I'm pretty confident in my picks. I don't think that they would be any different if I spent hours and hours and hours of tape study on these guys. I'm pretty sure, like, from what I've seen, I've watched tape on all of these people, obviously, you can tell. But yeah, I'm pretty hyped for the card. I mean, it's not as good as week 7. I feel like maybe we went for like week 7 amazing card to like down a little bit. But hey, man, I love Dana White's Contender Series. I think you can kind of see it in my excitement. I love Dana White's Contender Series. I truly do. To wrap up the card, I'm going with Brandon Lewis. I think he's going to be an underdog. I'm going with Bruno Brazil. I'm going with Malik Lewis. I think he's going to be an underdog. I'm going with Ikram Alaskarov. He should be probably a pretty big favourite. It's a nightmare matchup for Souza. And I'm going to be going with Farid Basharat as well. I think the odds in that one might be somewhat close, but I think that Farid might be a little bit overhyped in the width of the line. So maybe Bagoso, very live underdog. But let's see, man. Let's see how it looks. I'm nervous for the card, man. Malik Lewis and Brandon Lewis are 2 very potentially iffy picks, but I'm going to go with them. Let's just move on. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Really do appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.